people can see the value in them. They oftentimes increase quite a bit. You see bobbleheads that in 1960 were available for 10 cents or a quarter at a stadium, now selling for several $1,000s.
Wow.
And even more recently, bobbleheads that were given away at a game, 10 years ago at a Brewers game, for example, selling now for $1,000. So pretty crazy.
Welcome to St. Louis in Tune. I'm your host, Arnold Stricker, along with co-host Mark Langston. St. Louis in Tune focuses on issues that impact and connect the greater St. Louis area. Our topics include the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, health, history, housing, humor, justice, and sports. Co-founder and CEO Phil Sklar from the National Bobblehead Hall of Fame and Museum on the line with us today. Phil, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Great.
We're doing fine, thank you. How are things up in Milwaukee land?
Cold.
We have quite a bit of resurgence of COVID, so not the best. The museum has been closed since mid-March, but we're chugging along producing bobbleheads and selling them online. So we've been keeping really busy during the pandemic. But, so far we've been staying healthy and trying to keep busy.
Now, how does a guy who has a Bachelor of Science in Finance, a Master's of Science in Accounting from Notre Dame, an MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, who's been a senior auditor at Ernst & Young, end up being a co-founder of a National Bobblehead Hall of Fame and Museum?
Shouldn't laugh.
Yeah, so I guess the quick answer is sort of getting bored climbing up the corporate ladder. I don't really like heights too much, so maybe that has something to do with it. I was starting to, climb up and continuing to progress, and just sort of decided to jump off that ladder and go to a new one where I could control things and build something from scratch. So, the MBA from Kellogg and the work experience, prepared me for that jump. And 2014. Me and the other co-founder, Brad, who's been a longtime friend, made that leap, and we've been plugging away at it ever since.
Now, you've got this, timeline on the website of the history of this, and kind of goes back to 2002 when Brad was collecting these bobbleheads as he was a member of the Rockford Riverhawks staff, which is a minor league baseball team?
Yeah, minor league team in Rockford, Illinois, so just north of you a little bit and south of us here in Milwaukee. But they gave away a bobblehead for the first time, and he got it. We were both going to school in Milwaukee for undergrad at the time, and we thought, hey, if we're going to go to Brewers or Bucks or local hockey game, we might as well circle the bobblehead dates because thought they were fun. We saw online they were selling, for sometimes $50, $100, and they were given away for free, at the price of your ticket. So we started going to those games specifically and built that collection up. And before we knew it, the collection was growing a bit out of control.
Now, a bit out of control, like well over 1,000, right? What I read, it was like taking up your dining room table and everywhere else there.
Yeah, I was in the kitchen table. We got a call shortly after we announced the idea for the museum from a producer at the Today Show saying they wanted to do a segment and to keep those bobbleheads on the kitchen table because they wanted to film them there. And so we kept them there and then moved them shortly after that because we were, getting them out of the condo and getting ready to get the museum opened up.
Wow.
So it's kind of like the personal collections, and then you had donations made by people. I remember reading that one person who was had a terminal illness donated his collection, which was like $1,500 or $2,000 or something like that.
Yeah. So exactly. It started with the personal collection. We announced the idea in November of 2014, and before we knew it, we were getting bobbleheads sent to us from teams and individuals, organizations, businesses across the country who wanted to contribute their bobbleheads to the collection and have them on display. One of the people who saw that story was Bob Manick. They called him Bobblehead Bob. and he had amassed a collection of about 1,500 bobbleheads. People would, get them whenever they saw them at flea markets or garage sales or games, and bring them to him. And he saw our story, and he had a terminal cancer, and decided he wanted his bobbleheads to go where people could enjoy them past, when he was going to be alive. And so he donated them. We were able to get him some great attention. His story was featured on CNN and ESPN, among dozens of other outlets, which he was able to see while he was alive. And we recently had his family stop by and able to see a plaque dedicated to him at the museum, as well as so many of his bobbleheads on display.
Wow.
Very, very cool. What's the affinity of bobbleheads? Why do some people just go crazy and Google over them?
They do.
Yeah, it definitely is more of a North American phenomenon, although we see it growing elsewhere. We do like to collect more so in the U.S. as opposed to other countries, so I think it's a little bit of that. The second is we have, such affinity for our sports teams and players here, whether it's, people in St. Louis going nuts for the Cardinals and Blues. There's just that level of sports here in the U.S., unlike a lot of other countries, and people want to show off their pride, and bobbleheads do a great job of that. And I think the last thing is people can see the value in them. They oftentimes increase quite a bit. You see bobbleheads that in 1960 were available for 10 cents or a quarter at a stadium, now selling for several $1,000s.
Wow.
And even more recently, bobbleheads that were given away at a game, 10 years ago at a Brewers game, for example, selling now for $1,000. So pretty crazy. Not every bobblehead is like that, but there's definitely quite a few examples, and people just see that and they enjoy them.
Because the history of bobbleheads really kind of started in Asia, and with, I was reading something about the King of England, or it was the not the Duke of Windsor, maybe it was the Duke of Windsor.
Yeah.
Who?
There was Queen Charlotte was one of the first. There's a painting of her in Buckingham Palace with two figurines behind her that had heads that nodded. They were on sort of a spring-like contraption, and those bobbleheads are actually still in the collection at Buckingham Palace, and similar ones are sold for about $35,000 a pair, two separate bobbleheads, but definitely not the ones that people sort of envision when they think of a bobblehead today. But definitely something that, if you have them around, some of the older ones can definitely be pretty valuable.
Now, are most bobbleheads, I remember growing up as a kid, you always saw the sports ones, like the baseball ones for sure. And it was really, at the time, I guess I was only exposed to the baseball ones, but it was mainly sports. And then it expanded really kind of into a lot of different areas, correct?
Yeah, so 1960 was when the first sports bobbleheads came out. Actually, all the leagues had bobbleheads in that time, so baseball, basketball, football, and hockey. There were officially licensed bobbleheads representing all the teams. Baseball was definitely the most popular, followed by football, and then probably basketball and hockey next. But it started out that way, and really soon after 1964, there was a set of bobbleheads for the Beatles that was released. It was extremely popular, probably the most iconic non-sports bobbleheads, and now it's probably about 70% sports and 30% everything else, from movies, TV, comics, political, really you name it. It could be turned into a bobblehead, and if it hasn't yet, it's something that we're probably working on, or somebody is working on out there.
Now, I noticed that you guys also sell bobbleheads for good causes. Can you kind of explain that? One in particular where, the benefits of the bobblehead go to the Special Olympics.
Yeah, so we've, done quite a few bobbleheads, starting with really the first one that started the whole concept for the museum. A friend of ours who we met back in 2002 when we came to Milwaukee, and we were going to school at UWM and started collecting bobbleheads. He's a manager for the Milwaukee Panthers sports teams and Special Olympian named Michael Pohl, and we thought, about 2013, hey, let's see if we can get a bobblehead of Michael made to honor him and raise money for Special Olympics. And we reached out to the school, but they didn't really have a budget, so we took matters into our own hands and found out about the production process and everything that goes into making and producing and selling and marketing a bobblehead, and had a really good experience with that. You know, he loved it. People that knew him and even people that didn't know him or, you know, had only heard of him, loved the idea and bought bobbleheads. And so we sort of started brainstorming other ideas and have always tried when there's a nice fit like that to build in a charity component. We did it more recently, and our biggest endeavor was with Dr. Fauci, and to date with him and governors and essential heroes since April 1st, we've raised over now close to $300,000, just right around that mark for PPE for hospital and healthcare workers. So it's definitely something that we enjoy doing. I think it gives people a great feeling when they're buying something that, you know, supports a great cause as well.
That's tremendous, and I want to compliment you on that, because it's not a selfish thing you're doing there. You're really assisting other people in a huge way. Now, I know bobbleheads used to be just kind of like one cast. They were either, you know, paper mache or like a bisque kind of thing, and then they would be painted different colors, etc. But you kind of got into this where there's custom bobbleheads now. You know, you got the Dr. Fauci, you've got Vice President Pence with the fly on his head from the debate. Now, talk about some of those, and also how do you do those?
Yes, so, you know, things have come a long way since, you know, the 1960s. When you look at those bobbleheads, and it was like you say, one mold, everybody looked the same. Mid-1960s, there was bobbleheads of 4 players: Mickey Mantle and Roberto Clemente, Roger Maris, and Willie Mays. And they looked maybe a little bit like the player, but it was more of a generic face as well. And it was 1999, bobblehead sort of reemerged in popularity when the San Francisco Giants gave away the first one. But even then, it was sort of the same looking body, a little bit different head. But today, we can do pretty much anything. We can. I think the Mike Pence one is a great example, and we just saw pictures of the painted bobblehead from the factory for the first time yesterday. You know, we have him at his desk with the exact, you know, poses and facial expression, and, you know, a really detailed fly with even a plexiglass-like barrier next to the desk. So that's something that, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, wouldn't be able to be done to that level of detail. So it's something that has definitely advanced, and we can pretty much turn anything you can think of into a bobblehead and make it something fun and unique that people out there will enjoy.
So you take a picture, somebody sends in a picture, which helps with the likeness, obviously, right. And I guess plastic is easy to, mold and things like that. And then
I think they're sending a picture in of you right now, Arnold.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's on its way. Yeah.
That is how it starts out, just with pictures, and graphic design helps a lot. Computer renderings help quite a bit, but also the sculptors have gotten a lot more advanced and do a lot better job, you know, after dozens of years of doing it. And they are all hand sculpted. You know, the initial mold is hand sculpted, and then additional molds are made if you have, you know, 1,000 or 10,000 or 40,000 made. And then they are hand painted. Eventually, we might expect to see 3D printing playing a big role.
Yeah.
And other technologies that could, you know, revolutionize the process. But for now, it still is very hands-on and detailed process.
So the museum, you have a museum. How large of a building is that museum? Is it a big?
Yeah, so we have about 4,000 square feet and about 6,500 unique bobbleheads on display. Everything from, you know, the sports to the non-sports. Every team is represented with at least one bobblehead. Most teams have, if not dozens, sometimes 100 bobbleheads, and then, you know, all the non-sports bobbleheads are very well represented as well. Everything from, like I mentioned, the political bobbleheads, which Milwaukee is supposed to host the Democratic National Convention this year, so we were gearing up for that before it got basically canceled. But yes, just a huge range, and then also exhibits and information about the history and the story behind them, and how the museum came together, and just a lot of different things that people wouldn't really expect to be able to find or to learn about. And I guess once you come and experience it, you walk away with a lot more knowledge about bobbleheads than you probably ever thought you would have.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So what's your oldest bobblehead that you have at the museum?
Yeah, so we have some from the turn of the century, from the late 1800s at the museum and on display. The history timeline has a lot of the ones that I mentioned, from the first stadium giveaway bobblehead to the Beatles set to Willie Mays and some of the first player bobbleheads. So definitely have a great cross-section, and we are looking, we continually add new bobbleheads to the collection. We don't have them all. We do have quite a few that aren't on display, so we can rotate in and out, and, if the Brewers are playing, the Cardinals, we can have a special section of, more Cardinals bobbleheads for all the fans that are in town for the game, and we do get a ton of visitors when any teams are coming through Milwaukee area, whether it's the Bucks or the Brewers or Packers or Badgers. We see people traveling from all over the place, and the Bobblehead Hall of Fame has been on a lot of their itineraries.
Wow.
Now, I'm looking at, I know that you have like this 3-foot-tall bobblehead of LeBron James.
Oh.
And I'm looking right now at your Hall of Fame picture where you've got this guy in the middle. He's pretty tall, too. What's he, 4 feet tall or something like that?
I think you might be referring to, we have a sort of we call it our founding member bobblehead, which members receive, just that classic 1960s bobblehead look. But we have, he's just tall, so he's taller than most visitors. And his head bobbles really well. During the quarantine period, we got a 7-foot, I think 7.5 foot tall Vladimir Guerrero bobblehead. That was gifted to us by the producer, and so I'm looking at him now bobbling his head, and so we're if it bobbles, it's something that we're interested in having.
So this is a real technical question. How has, I'm interested, when you mentioned you had one from like the late 1800s, and now you have this big, however big that Vladimir Guerrero one was, the springs have to be, really heavy duty for something like that. Has how bobbleheads are put together changed at all, or is it pretty much kind of the same deal over the course of 100 years?
Yeah, so it has changed a little bit. Some of the earlier ones are more on a hook type contraption that makes the head bobble. In the 1950s, it changed to more of the standard spring that we see today. But in general, the bobbleheads have always sort of just been the body, the spring, or some type of contraption that makes the head nod, and then the head. So it's something that's been consistent. I think that's one of the things that's led to the staying power and making them that pop culture icon that they've become today.
Now, how does a bobblehead become a Hall of Fame bobblehead? What's the criteria there?
That's a great question, and I think it really comes down to being unique and being something special. We have one bobblehead in the Hall of Fame, and our goal, or our initial plan, was to have our first official induction, our first major class this year, but the pandemic has sort of pushed that out to next year. But we'll have a voting panel as well as members of the museum and the general public to help decide which bobbleheads truly are Hall of Fame worthy. And the only one in there right now is Pete Rose. We gave the public an option, or the ability to vote whether Pete Rose's bobblehead should be the first one allowed in the Hall of Fame. And this is obviously because he's not allowed in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Right. And it was about 94% saying yes, so we decided we'll make his bobblehead the first one in the Hall of Fame. And we had him in Milwaukee a few years ago to accept that honor, and his bobblehead is right now alone in the Hall of Fame, but probably will be joined by several other bobbleheads soon.
So it could be sports, or it could be, something else. Just
if it bobbles,
if it bobbles,
yes.
If it bobbles,
if it bobbles.
That's the prerequisite.
And we were
that's the
talking
bubble.
before we started interviewing you that I remember dogs in the back of cars where their heads would go up and down. Would that be considered a bobblehead?
Yeah, so I'm looking at a full case of dogs and cats and panda bear, all different animals. But yeah, a lot of the ones
Hula girls.
are those those ones that people had in the windows with the dogs that have. And those more are the hook type contraptions, but their heads bobble, and those are definitely part of the bobblehead history.
Now, do you have one where the lights light up of the dog? Because I remember seeing one when I was a kid where people would put the brakes on, the lights would go on the head of the dog, or the turn lights. Yeah, the eyeballs. Do you have one of those?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that.
We'll sell you one.
Maybe we have some, but they're not. They no longer light up because they're not connected. But yeah, that's definitely something I'll have to look into. I don't think I was around at that time, but definitely have to look through our collection and see if we have one of those.
And we did mention previously that January 7th of 2015 was the inaugural National Bobblehead Day in the United States. And also the world's largest bobblehead was 15 feet tall, named Goldie.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That's big.
Yes. Yeah, so January 7th is one of our probably our favorite day of the year. And so we always have a fun time with that. We got it the day recognized as National Bobblehead Day, and now every team across the country for the most part is tweeting and doing social media promotions and interacting with fans, doing giveaways at the stadium, all kinds of different fun things for the day. And we see collectors showing off their collections, and just a fun way to celebrate bobbleheads for sure. And there's actually a 17-foot Conan O'Brien bobblehead out there that didn't get I don't think they contacted Guinness for the world record, but there's one that's about 2 feet larger than that last we heard was in the parking lot at their studio.
Wow. Bobbleheadhall.com, folks. Bobbleheadhall.com. Phil Sklar, co-founder and CEO of the National Bobblehead Hall of Fame and Museum. Phil, thanks very much. This is great. I saw your virtual tour. It's unbelievable. I really look forward to getting up to Milwaukee and going through the Hall of Fame up there and having you give us a tour.
Right.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks, Arnold. Appreciate you having us on. And anytime you want to talk bobbleheads, you know where to find us.
Okay.
You take care, Phil. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Phil.
Yep, you too.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please take time to like and share this and other episodes of St. Louis in Tune that can be found on SoundCloud and Apple Podcast. St. Louis in Tune is produced in cooperation with KWRH 92.9 FM and Motif Media Group. Thank you for listening. I'm Arnold Strickland.